Good. All right. Couple of minutes behind this morning, but it's good to see everyone here. We have a guest speaker for this morning's class and services, Michael Clark. What is your title at MSOP? Yeah, it's everything I know, but recruiting, digital promotions, and fundraising. So Michael's going to give us an update, a status report on the work at MSOP and the Bible study this morning, and then he'll be preaching for us. Yes, he is related to the director of the school in some way. Most importantly, he's the father of the director's grandchildren, which is all that BJ cares about. Michael is nothing anymore. But Michael is a good man, and so we're pleased and welcome to have him with us. Listen intently, and if you have questions, feel free to ask him. Michael?
That's very true. When I got married, it was, when are you and Megan coming over to eat dinner with us? My mom and dad would always say. Then we had our first child, Adam, and it was, when is Adam coming over? And it quickly changed. And then I would walk in the house and they'd say, did you bring Adam? And so my own mother and father, they say a prophet's without honor in his own country. That's true for children too, the moment grandchildren become a thing. So I'm blessed to be able to work at MSOP, blessed to be here with you today. And I appreciate your prayers and your questions about my mom. She did have a brain tumor successfully removed this past Thursday, and we're awaiting biopsy results back to see what that was and what we need to do next. But she's home resting, which is very good. She'd been having a lot of problems over the summer, and we're thankful that we got it out. In regards to the work of the Memphis School of Preaching, I am sure that you have heard countless reports in your time in the Lord's church. And oftentimes, if you were like I was growing up, some of those reports were not very enthusiastic in your own receiving of them because you may not know much about it, and therefore it's hard to keep up. What I like to try to do is mix it with a Bible class that is about the Bible. We look at Bible verses and give you information about the school so that it's not just a standard report. And so we'll begin with the idea of some Bible questions, some Bible study as we work our way toward the information. And the question has to be asked, why is a work like the Memphis School of Preaching important? Certainly there are countless schools throughout the world, and they are trying to train gospel preachers to preach the gospel. And we're thankful that there are many schools that are faithfully holding to the Word of God. They're trying to train others to do so. I, of course, am biased because I work for one, and I did graduate from that one school, but I know we have many schools out there that are worthy of consideration. I'm here to tell you about MSOP, but when you think about it from just a spiritual side, why is it important to think about preaching? We just recently hit in our world 8 billion people on this earth. That's a lot. I went to a high school football game Friday night, and the home team had hardly anybody there. And the away team had a full band, a full everything, basically. And they ended up just destroying the home team. And you sat there and you looked at the difference in who was where, and you quickly realized, man, there's not a lot of participation on the home side. And it made a difference because the other crowd was louder. The other band was louder. In fact, they did a halftime show. The away team's band went first, did this amazing performance on the field and was very entertaining. And then all of a sudden it went to the home team band, who stayed in the stands because they didn't have enough people to go out onto the field. And they played a couple of songs and they called it a day. And it was just depressing from a football standpoint. You think of a stadium, though, that is quickly going to be filled this upcoming Saturday and for the next several Saturdays all throughout the country, that will have, just a ruckus amount of yelling and screaming, and there will be at capacity for many of those games, and we still haven't scratched the surface on how many people are on this earth, how many people are walking around that need the truth. And could you imagine having the opportunity to talk to them and to get to say something? I mean, people pay tickets, premium prices, pay for the tickets to go and see people hit each other for 3.5 to 4 hours. And we can't get people to want to hear about the gospel. And we want to try to find an opportunity and a way to put more people out into the world that can preach and give the gospel message. God made it very clear when he put Adam in the garden that he didn't want him to want for anything. He gave him everything that he needed. In fact, even when he saw that he needed Eve, he provided. And after a short period of time, it appears Adam and Eve made the decision to sin, bring transgression into the world. And from that day forward, it was no longer about giving them to a point where they had no need for anything. They needed everything. They had to work for what they were going to get. They had a need for a Savior that was going to come. And here we are in Romans chapter 10, as we look through the New Testament. Romans 10 and verse 14, we're told, how shall they hear without a preacher? How will people know about the gospel message, the message that saves, if somebody won't stand up and tell them? 8 billion souls. God doesn't desire for any one of them to perish. 2 Peter 3:9, you are probably familiar with. The Lord's not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but he's long-suffering to us, not desiring that any should perish. He doesn't want to see anybody stumble. He doesn't want to see anybody go to hell. That's not what he wants. A lot of people want to depict God as some mean and capricious God who holds people over the fire and is ready to drop them at a moment's notice. Then why would we have him providing a way for salvation to be obtainable? Why would we have him saying, hey, if you'll do this, you can live, you can survive, and you can make it to eternity, and you won't suffer. You'll have an eternal opportunity to be with fellow Christians and with God. Why would he want that? If he really wanted everybody to be destroyed, he had plenty of opportunities to do so. Genesis chapter 6. In fact, he could have even said in Genesis 19, the very fact that a nation could have two cities like this, in Sodom and Gomorrah, is enough for me to scrap it. I'm done. But he didn't do that. He continued to provide ways for hope and ways for opportunity to be able to be saved. We have a God that wants people to be saved. And yet in Acts chapter 8, you have Philip, who was told to run toward this Ethiopian eunuch, and he asked the eunuch, do you understand what you're reading? The eunuch says the very question as to why preaching schools and other things that try to train people in preaching the gospel can be so important. How can I unless somebody guides me? How am I going to know what to do unless somebody shows me the way? I stay in a lot of hotels now, and you develop a system when you're on the road a lot, and you have a system that works really well for you. And then last night I went into the bathroom to wash my hands, and the sink wasn't running. And it took about 10, 15 minutes for the water to come back on. That's not normal. You're not ready for that. But you have a system in place, and when that system doesn't work, you've got to adapt. I can watch videos on how to fix a faucet. That doesn't mean I know how to do it. And I knew nothing last night when I turned that on other than the fact that it should be running and it's not. But it wasn't like I could sit there and go, well, I know how to fix this. I wouldn't be able to unless somebody showed me the way. Years ago, I made the decision that I was going to change the oil in our cars going forward, save some money. And I learned very quickly that you don't save money for about the first 7 or 8 oil changes, because you got to buy all the materials, you got to buy all the tools, and then you're going to make mistakes. And as I did, you'll cross thread maybe something and oil will leak out, and now you've got to start all over again. I must have spent so much more in the financial department and getting everything put together than I would have saved by just going to a place to get it done. But when I finally learned how to do it, that's where the savings kicked in. How can I unless somebody guides me? How am I going to know what to do unless somebody shows me the way? And we have so many people in our communities, in our country, and our world, that's their situation. I preached in Somerville, Tennessee for 5 years in local work, and we had one of the deacons there still faithfully serving. And for years, he lived down the road from one of the members, and eventually somebody came by and knocked. And they asked him to have a Bible study, and he said, I've been waiting for y'all. I've been wanting to have a Bible study for a very long time, and I just wanted somebody to show that they cared. So when they finally knocked on the door, they had a Bible study. He became a Christian. His wife became a Christian, couple years later, he's serving as a deacon in the Lord's church. Faithful deacon, faithful member. Somebody needed to guide him, though. How many people could it be that are in our very area right now, in your surrounding area, that's all that it would take? And if you had one more person on the front lines, what could be accomplished? Of course, we all know we're supposed to be ministers of the gospel. I don't want it to sound like it's just the preacher that has to do all of this, but I do know that preachers have the blessing of that being their life. They get to do that for their job. In many cases, they get to be supported by congregations where their whole job is to simply go out and preach and teach and to visit and to get people to know more about Christ, and that's a blessing. And if we could have more people like that, our chances go even higher than they already are. And of course, if everybody would take it upon themselves to try and be ministers of the gospel, we could have greater success too. But we have 8 billion people on the earth, 8 billion souls. None of them should perish in God's eyes because of how much he loves them. But they will perish if we don't change them. Now, when you think about the idea of success rates, and the question is often asked, hey, how do we know if a preacher is successful? You know, if a preacher ministers for 50 years, and in that time frame, he only gets one person, sometimes people would say, well, I guess he wasn't very successful. In fact, I've heard it said before after gospel meetings, man, we only had one response. Guess it wasn't a very good meeting. Stop for a moment and think about what we're saying when we make those statements. In Matthew 16:26, we're told one soul's worth the whole world. I heard a story of a preacher who had been told by his congregation that they were going to start paying him based on conversions and baptisms that he had. And he quickly said, then you can't afford me. And they said, what do you mean? And he took him to Matthew 16:26, and he says, hey, if one soul's worth the whole world and I have just one conversion, you owe me more than you could ever hope to pay me. And when we look at it from a success based on numbers only, that's how we judge success, we are going to cripple ourselves because the numbers will never match truly what they are actually. I know a restaurant is only successful by how much money it makes. I know a football team or any other type of sports team is only successful based on their record, but even then, how they do in the playoffs or whatever they have in college or any of the other sports that might happen. They have another way to judge success even beyond a record. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. The Memphis Grizzlies had a very good season in basketball, and then they promptly lost in the playoffs. As a fan of the Memphis Grizzlies, that was a failure. No matter the record, they didn't do what we hoped they would do and go all the way and win. We judge it all the time by that. Clothing stores, financial store, anything like, you look at a bank, you look at all of this stuff, their success judged by numbers and how much money they're bringing in. And you go a little while without bringing in enough money, you're going to close down. If 2020 taught us nothing other than the fact that there are several stores and several places that are quickly expendable if no one can go there, then just look at the movie theaters that had to shut down in 2020. Some of them, what we'd call mom and pop run movie theaters. Not the big chains, they could continue to take out loan after loan and survive. But there are several theaters that had to just shut their doors because nobody was coming anymore. They didn't have enough money to make it. And if you judged them based on 2020, that'd be a failure. But say that preacher only gets one person. Matthew 16:26 says he's been able to influence the salvation as if it was an entire world of people that have been saved. That's the worth in God's eyes. Do you really think that if he preaches for 50 plus years, he's only going to get one person? You know, I watch sermons now from Brother Curtis Cates, Brother Garland Elkins. I've seen debates by Thomas B. Warren. Other videos that have been conducted by men that were great soldiers of the cross who have been gone for many years now. And yet the internet is a powerful tool. And there are people who had these videos, they've uploaded them to certain sites. You can watch them, and though they have since passed on, they're still influencing me. And the ability to do that shows that even if a preacher preaches 50 years and only gets one person, his influence goes far beyond even the local congregation because of the way technology works today. You never know the impact that you'll make. My father's a good example of that in the sense that he does a program with Mike Hickson called Counterpoint, and that program is nationally televised, and there are people all over the place where he goes and says, we love watching that program. People he's never met. Think of the impact that that makes and the impact that it will make even long after he's gone, with the reruns and all of the episodes that will continue to be cycled through. It's very unlikely that you're just going to reach one person, but even if you did, you've still been a very successful preacher. We need to remind ourselves that Jesus himself had a following in John chapter 6 that left, pretty decent following that left him. In verses 60 through 66, they were displeased with what he'd preached, and so they said, we'll just go elsewhere. If we judge success based on numbers alone, Jesus would appear to be a failure. And I don't think anybody is willing to suggest that. I know I'm not. Now, we train our students to be men of the book. We don't want them to just know it. Mentioned earlier, I can watch videos or I can read thing after thing about how to do something, but just having the head knowledge doesn't mean that I know how to apply it. There was a preacher years ago, he moved into the area of the local congregation where he was going to begin working, and he was at the grocery store checking out. At the cashier, there was a picture of the previous preacher that said, do not serve this man. What question do you think the new minister was dreading the most by the cashier? Oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, you just moved to the area? What do you do? I'd probably rather not say, because evidently you guys have a negative taste in your mouth about the Lord's church. I lived in an area where that had happened. We had a mayor who had to resign in disgrace, caught in an adulterous affair. He was also a preacher at a local congregation in the area that was of the Lord's body. And you go knock on those doors, you go tell people that you're with the Church of Christ. Oh, you're with that guy? You know who he is, right? You know what he did? Yes, ma'am, I know what he did, but we're not all like that. And all these conversations start and stop with that one example. We don't want our students to leave and just know the book. We want them to live it. And that's what we try to train them to do. I have to say this before we move on. Unfortunately, not everybody does it. Not everybody that sits for 2 years at the feet of men who have studied for decades, not everybody says after they leave that they're going to continue doing that. And even within the last few weeks, I've heard of people that have left the faith, that were faithful, on fire for God. Something got in the way. The devil is always after people. He wants you, he wants me. He's not going to stop. But we try to train, and we understand that after the 2 years are over, all we can do is hope that when they have a question, they'll call. They'll reach out. And many of them do. Unfortunately, sometimes we'll hear of people who were in our classes that have gone astray. I don't know if Brother Devin remembers this from when he was in school, but I was told this, to look to my left, to look to my right, and at least 1 to 2 of those people would probably become unfaithful. And you think about that for a minute, and you think, there's no way. And then I look at my own graduating class, and there are some that I don't know about them anymore. I don't know where they're at. I don't know how they're doing. We only do what we can. The rest is on the person to take the training and apply it. As we think about facts of the Memphis School of Preaching, kind of more on the technical side of the school itself, we have been in service to the Lord as far as training gospel preachers is concerned for 66 years. Well, actually 56 years, I'm sorry. We started in 1966. This is our 56th going on to the 57th year. And in 1966, I wish I could tell you that the exact amount of graduates we have, but unfortunately, nobody started a record when we started back up in 1966. The school itself, nobody started with a log. And so what we know is there's been about 1,200 plus men that have graduated. This past Father's Day, we graduated 9 new preachers into the country and into the world. And then, Lord willing, this upcoming Father's Day next year, we'll graduate 15 more. We currently have 26 students on campus. One of them is in our missions program, which is a dedicated year of study to mission work. There are many people who want to be missionaries, but they don't really know where to start. You can go to MSOP, and if you haven't gone through a 2-year program at a preaching school yet, you go through the 2-year program, then you can go through the 3rd year, which is the missions program, and you'll be on your way. If you've already attended a school of preaching in the country somewhere else, you would be eligible to come on for that missions program, which is what this student did. He went to a school in Texas, and then we talked to him about the missions program. He was very interested in it and decided to come on after he graduated. On that note, when we have students coming in, the first-year class, we have several young men, several men that are trying to preach the gospel. They've maybe never preached. Some of them have preached. We've got different backgrounds in every class of how they've done as far as their preaching experience. But we have right now 26 students currently on campus. The Memphis School of Preaching is overseen by the Forest Hill congregation that sits there on Forest Hill Irene Road in Germantown, Tennessee. So does the campus of the school. It's all in Germantown. And this local congregation that supports us, Forest Hill, the elders are so dedicated and so invested in preacher training that every year from their own contribution, this is not outside help, just from the own local contribution, they contribute $500,000 a year to the work of the school. And so we're very thankful that they're invested in training. There's a lot of things that take place when you have the different facilities that we have, the staff, the faculty, all of the things considered, and the elders are very behind the work that is being done, and they're very dedicated into doing what's necessary to help train gospel preachers. Of course, the coursework that you would look at MSOP is you're going to study the Bible, the 66 books, and we do a pretty good job of getting verse by verse covered at MSOP. There are some exceptions to that rule. There are some times where a general overview of a certain section of Scripture might need to be given for time's sake. But generally speaking, they cover most every verse of the Bible, and there are many classes that can boast that they covered verse by verse because of the opportunity they had and the way that the schedule worked out. And so they're blessed to say that they've gotten to do that. That's our goal always, but we also have classes that are outside of the 66 books, but they relate to those books and they need to be covered. For example, you know very well, denominational doctrines are very much alive in our world. They're around. People believe in different things for different reasons. And so we have 2 classes that talk about denominational doctrines. One of those classes, you'll learn how to debate, and you'll debate a student that is one of your fellow classmates. And if you're unlucky and there's an uneven number of students, you'll debate the director. And that has happened twice, and usually it's all in good fun, but usually that's quite the spectacle because the director will hold the error position for the sake of the exercise, and he will be able to utilize that and then see how well the student handles the truth. Both times that that's happened, I've witnessed it, and I can say, I don't know whether it's because they're debating the director and they're wanting to really make sure they do a good job, but both times both students have faithfully upheld the truth and done an excellent job in doing so. And there have been times where he's been able to say, now, I didn't do this because I knew it could trip you up, but here's one of the things they might say, and here's how you combat it. And so it's an exercise, learning different things that are taught and how to combat them. We have classes on English and Greek to help us understand the original language of the New Testament, as well as an overview of Hebrew if there's time for it. English tries to help you learn how to do different things, and one of the skills that they utilize is diagramming sentences. And they try to get that done where you can diagram a verse of the Bible and figure out exactly how it works in the language and parts of speech, and you can easily help people understand things by diagramming a verse. And it's a very effective tool in Bible study. And of course, several other classes on preaching, 8 in total, and that makes up the 2-year program. And in the 2-year program, you clock just shy of 3,000 hours, 2,960. So it is a full-time job. You don't have to worry about outside work while you're going through the program. We want you to be able to focus on your studies and building upon your faith and building the faith that you have, or continuing to build upon the foundation that you've had for years. We want you to be able to focus on that. We're blessed that congregations like yourself and others and individuals that are very kind to reach out to the school and give support. In the case of students, I know you're supporting at least one student. Are you supporting more than one Brennan Mallory, though, who you are supporting, is a great young man. I've known him for many years. His family's wonderful, and we're thankful that there are good congregations like yourself supporting our students. We couldn't do what we do. Students couldn't do what they do without good churches like you, and we're thankful to you for that. Something to consider if you have a young man that is getting close to college and he's trying to figure out what to do, where to go next, and maybe he's mentioned, well, I might go to Freed-Hardeman, or I might go to Amherst University, or one of the other Christian universities like Faulkner or Heritage. If that's brought up, even if it's not something you might want to mention, over the last 10 years, a concerted effort has been made by those universities to reach out to MSOP, among other places, and ask them, how can we help y'all and how can you help us? And one of the ways that we're able to help our students a significant amount is with what we call degree completion. At MSOP, when you graduate, you will have what is eligible as it'll be treated as a bachelor's degree of arts and science in the state of Tennessee. Unfortunately, if you go outside of the state of Tennessee, it will not be recognized as that. It will be equivalent, but not seen that way. And so if you want to continue on to where every state will recognize the degree that you have, degree completion exists. And if you wanted to go to MSOP first and then head to Freed-Hardeman, you would be a junior instead of a freshman. And that would save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, both in student debt and then the interest that comes with that student debt. Also, with Amherst University, they have a Good Fight of Faith scholarship where you can go for just the fees. And the fees to attend Amherst University come out to about max of $2,700 a year. If you don't do that, you'll be paying either out of pocket or through taking out student loans $10,000 a year. And so there is a lot of savings involved when you go through MSOP first because of the amount of credit hours that are accepted by these other universities. And we like to mention that just for recognition and for consideration. It's not a requirement you go to us first. It's not a requirement you go to a Christian university first. But I've often heard young men say, well, I'm going to go here and then I'm going to come to MSOP. And I just beg them, if you are dead set on doing that, will you come here first and let us save you money so that you don't have as much debt when you get out of school? Because when you leave Memphis, you won't have any debt. We don't take out loans. We're not involved in that. You can apply as a veteran. You can get VA approval, but that goes directly to the student, not to the school. We're not in the loan giving business, and we never will be. There are also special events that happen throughout the year. I mentioned the missions program. We have a World Missions Forum that happens in October every year, and it kind of seeks to give us an overview of some of the missionary works that are going on, as well as a understanding of why mission work is so important, and looking at the Bible, and it's talking about missions work. We have a program that I know the deans can tell you a lot about as well. It's called Foundations, and it is started out as a preacher training camp, which was for young men only, and it quickly realized that there were a lot of young women that needed training in the areas that they can serve and that they can know more about God's Word. And so we opened it up for 2 tracks, a track for the ladies, a track for the young men, and they have an opportunity to come to the campus for a week and stay together in the apartments, girls with girls, of course, boys with boys, and then they go to classes all day long, basically. A lot of camps, there's nothing wrong with this, but a lot of camps, it's a lot of fun and some Bible sprinkled in. Foundations is a lot of Bible with fun sprinkled in. And these young teenagers eat it up. It is one of the most encouraging weeks of the year to get to see all of these young people that are desiring to learn more about God, and they come to a camp where they know we're going to be in Bible class for a good majority of the day. And Brother Devin and Neely have been very, very invested in that work for us. We're thankful to them and the classes that they've helped to teach, the counseling that they give as counselors, and we're grateful to have an opportunity to have that camp. And often what happens is young men go to the camp like Brennan Mallory, and they realize, I want to preach. And they'll end up coming to school too. And within the last 4 to 5 years, we've had almost 40 or 50 total students that have been, or the last 10 years, I should say, 40 or 50 students that have started at Foundations and gone on to the 2-year program. And so we're thankful to that as well. I mentioned earlier that we're not in the loan giving business. There's no tuition or fees to attend MSOP. We don't require that. We do ask that you have your living expenses covered through support and that you'll take care of that in any way that you need by basically the process is once you've been approved, you'll send out letters to congregations. And if you're told no, or if congregations don't respond back and you're struggling to make your support, as long as we've seen an effort on your part, the school can help you by giving you either contacts or by helping you locate the remaining support that you need. There are countless stories I could tell if time permitted, but it won't, of people who showed up on campus with no money to their name. And by the end of the first couple days, they had their full support raised. And so we always tell people, don't make money an obstacle that will keep you from coming, because we've had too many success stories of people who have been able to come and get what they needed. And while you're waiting on what you need, we're not going to let you go hungry. We'll take care of you. We'll help you in any way that we can, especially when we know that you've been making an effort on your part and that you're not just expecting some type of handout. There's too many people in the world that that's kind of their mentality, but our students, they see the blessings of God through financial support when they come to school in certain cases without anything, and after a day or two they're told, hey, we've got it fully covered. You just focus on your studies now. What a blessing that is. The faculty at MSOP, as we bring this to a close, there's about 400 plus years of faculty experience and local work that we have combined from all of our faculty. Of course, you know my dad, the director, B.J. Clark. You've seen him before, I know, and others. You probably have heard the name Dan Cates, Curtis Cates' son. You probably have heard the name Alan Webster a time or two. He's, of course, involved in house-to-house, heart-to-heart, polishing the pulpit, makes a ton of tracts that many churches have in their foyers. He's just one of the recent additions we've made. And Brother Rod Rutherford's son, Kevin. Rod was an instructor at the school for many years. He also preached in Gatlinburg and was very instrumental in writing several books on several different Bible topics. His son, Kevin, just is the most recent acquisition that MSOP has been blessed to have. He started back in June and has been working with us full-time since then, and he's taking on a lot of the classwork that Brother Bobby Liddell is leaving behind. He is semi-retired now, only teaching about one class a quarter. And so Brother Rutherford is taking up most of the classes that Brother Liddell taught. And we also have Brother Waycaster leave, and so Brother Rutherford and Brother Webster are taking up the classwork that he left behind as well. You know Keith Mosier, I'm sure, Brother Billy Bland, and we have adjunct faculty like Mike McDaniel and others that all make up the faculty at MSOP. Brother Scott Kane, who is the new preacher at Forest Hill, started back in February of this year. He teaches one of the classes in the 2-year program. We just have many men who are very skilled in the years of study and time that they've put in to preaching and teaching the gospel, and our students are blessed to sit at their feet. And I can be honest and tell you, there have been many times with the new additions on the faculty that were not there when I was in school in 2015 to 17, where I've gone in an hour where I don't have much work to do in the office, and I'll sit and listen to their instruction for a little while and try to add to the notes that I have to see if there's new stuff that they're going to bring out that I've never considered or that I didn't have written in my notes. And that's a blessing to have that many men that are knowledgeable about preaching and teaching. Let me close with this. And I know I've been talking fast. I'm sorry. I have that tendency. Let me close with this. We have a 20-acre campus. That's where our whole school and library, as well as the apartments, sit. I mentioned to you that our students for foundations, our campers, when they come, they stay on campus. We don't have them out in tents. We're blessed to have 4 apartment buildings with 8 units apiece, and so we can house 32 couples or 96 single students. They're 3-bedroom apartments. And I challenge you to look up the price of the local apartments in Germantown, Tennessee, and then try to see if they can match with the numbers that MSOP has. We're very blessed to where you will pay a fraction of the cost. That includes utilities, it includes the Wi-Fi, all of that. And you will not even come close, saving you thousands of dollars a year in housing. And you're right there on campus. And if you'll permit me to tell a bad joke that Brother Bland likes to tell, if it doesn't land, you can just blame him. The school does sit on an incline. The apartments sit on an incline. And though it's rare when we do get snow, Brother Bland likes to say, you can now brag that you've walked to school uphill in the snow both ways. Thank you for the pity laugh. I appreciate it. We don't get a lot of snow, and so I don't know why he goes around telling everybody that, but Brother Bland's just something else. You know him. We're blessed to have those apartments for our campus. We're blessed that that helps us. In my opinion, though, I know a lot of good preaching schools exist. When people ask me what do I think sets MSOP apart, I tell them the apartments, the ability to have very affordable living arrangements for you right there on campus. About 20 years ago, if you attended MSOP, you had to live in a rental, or you and the other students had to go in together and get a rental or live in apartments, and you had to drive to get there, and things were just so difficult. And so Brother Garland Elkins, among many others, but Brother Elkins was very instrumental in this, raised about $4 million to build these apartments. And here we are. He's been gone now 6 years. 6 years. This August was year number 6. And our students are still benefiting from the work that he did. Remember, I mentioned earlier, the impact that you'll make, the chances of that only being on one person, very small. Brother Elkins today, though many of our students in some cases have never heard of him, they didn't live in an area where they heard his preaching or they never got to know him, they're benefiting from the work that he did in giving us that. The apartments are a big blessing. But let me close again with the Bible. Sometimes you'll hear people say, well, why should I preach? And they put it all on the person talking to them. You got to sell me on preaching. I've started saying, why shouldn't you? Give me the reasons why you should not be preaching. You know, Moses wanted to stay in Midian. That would have been more comfortable for him. Jonah wanted to go not to Nineveh, but to the other end of the earth in Tarshish. And yet God said, what's more comfortable for you is not what you need to be doing if you want to be pleasing to me. And so he asked both of those people to step out of their comfort zone. Moses willingly went after he had made the excuses that a lot of our modern day people make about why they can't preach. I'm not a good speaker. People won't listen to me. That was all that Moses said too. And God said, you're going. And Moses went, and look at what Moses was able to do with God on his side. Jonah went, and though I believe Jonah was in many cases kind of he was a prejudiced prophet for sure, but he wasn't really all that interested in seeing Nineveh be saved. Jonah went, and when God was on his side, when Jonah preached to that city of Nineveh, the whole city repented. What preacher can boast that today? Can you imagine if an entire city would repent and come to God? But the last example I like to give people is it would have been more comfortable for Jesus to stay in heaven instead of coming to the earth, Philippians chapter 2, 1 through 11, and living a life of a servant for God, ending in his own death. And so today, as you think about maybe yourself or someone you know that maybe you think, man, they could be a good preacher, or perhaps you're wondering, why shouldn't I be preaching? The question I want to give to you is, are you comfortable, or are you wanting to do something that can make a lasting impact? There are many people in the world that live and they never preach, and they're good, faithful Christians. And there are many people that we know that they lived for so many years not preaching, and like Jeremiah says, they got this fire within them out of nowhere, it appears. And just recently we graduated 2 of our 9 that were full-time businessmen making a lot of money in the fields that they were in. And they left that behind to go to preaching school and to now preach the gospel for the rest of their days. What a blessing that is. And we need more people to do that. If you look outside and you see the world, don't you see how messed up we're getting? We've known for years that we had problems, but it's just becoming more and more commonplace. We need preachers. We need people to stand up and be firm about what the Bible says and give God an opportunity to see more people added to his kingdom instead of us continuing on with the status quo and seeing more of the same. God bless y'all. Thank you so much for the work that you are involved in and helping preachers. Thank you for letting me be here this morning to teach the class and then in the service in just a little bit. I'm thankful to be here, thankful for your work, And I pray for you that your congregation will continue to thrive. I know you've got a good preacher, and I just pray that you'll continue to be able to make a good impact in the community. Thank you.